Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this webinar of Sensec and Cyber Together. We welcome you, and we would like to thank to the team of Sensec, to Klaus and Sophie, and all our speakers on this webinar that will be fully dedicated for the topic of threat detection and anomaly technologies, the problems and the traditional approach and challenges for the enterprise grade and to tackle the next generation of anomaly technologies and the detection and response for the network, endpoint, and application layers. So for the agenda today, we have 4 speakers with us: Dr. David Mofshevitz from Tracker Detect, Michael Langdell from Darnet, Jasper Zerlang from Logpoint, and Limor will replace Ifat Aaron, Limor Kesem from IBM Security. We wish to Ifat best of health and good spirit. She could not attend this webinar with us, so next time she will be the speaker. And in the end of the session, we will have a panel of all the 4 speakers. So please, if you have any question to one of the panelists or either all of them, you can drop that on the chat box. A few words about Cyber Together. It's the Israeli Cybersecurity Vendor Alliance. We are gathering the community and working on sharing information, sharing knowledge among the members, doing event, webinars, CISO roundtables, market validation, POC lab between the end users and engage them with new technologies. We build the pillars, enrich the pillars of the ecosystem with vendors, corporate, innovation sectors, association, communities. Same we are doing with Sensec from Denmark, that we're doing the partnership with other organizations around the globe, like More Trust from Morocco. We sign up a partnership, GSMC from Canada, Global Cyber Alliance, also from ELSEC from Belgium, AISP from Singapore, and some others. And we are here to work with you and to address the sharing of the information with the Israeli cybersecurity ecosystem. So I will let our partners from Sensec, Klaus, to start.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Alan, and thank you so much to Cyber Together for hosting one more joint event here for the strong Israeli and Danish community on cybersecurity. We're very happy to collaborate with you. We have so much in common. We have so much knowledge and value sharing to do together. So thank you so much for one more event that we can set up here. And on behalf of Sophie, who is the project manager and cyber responsible in Sensec, I would like to welcome you all as well as Alan did. And what we're doing is Sensec. We are like Cyber Together. We are a cluster. We are dealing with defense, space, and security. And we have 175 members, which are generally suppliers within the defense, space, and security industries, and suppliers, which means suppliers of products, services, and knowledge. So we cover bigger companies, SMEs, technology centers, universities, and consultants and integrators. So we cover everything, and what we basically do is to build value chains. So we try to improve every single link of the value chain, which includes end users and prime contractors. So we're very happy to be here, and we look forward to listening to the presentations here and to further grow the strong collaboration between our 2 clusters in our countries. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you, Klaus. So we have the first speaker up. Here you go, David Mofshevitz. I just made you a presenter. Please go ahead.
So I hope you see this properly now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Mofshevitz, and I'm the CTO and co-founder of Tracker Detect. And what I would like to speak about today is about what we call application detection and response, focusing on detecting abnormal behavior at the application layer or the API layer exposed by the applications. Now, why this is important? Because we all use many business applications, and about 80% of the organization report employee abuse or misuse of business application in the last 12 months, which means that application abuse or misuse is not something uncommon. On the contrary, it's very common. And about nearly half of the companies has no visibility on what employees are doing in the business application. And this visibility and the ability to detect abnormal misuse or abuse is crucial to ensure the security in general of a business today. And it's well known that early detection significantly reduce the cost of data breach. And it's true for the infrastructure, but it works the same way for the application. And the problem of application abuse and misuse is not going to diminish. On the contrary, it's becoming worse. Why? Because the shift from on-prem business application to SaaS application expand the attack surface. In addition, modern applications are exposing their services via API, and these APIs can be abused by third parties which have access to these APIs, or by anyone who has access to these APIs. And last but not least, the rapid shift from working within the office to remote working due to the COVID only increase the significance of this abuse and misuse. Now, when we look on the detection landscape, so on the infrastructure layer, when I mean network, endpoint, access, there is well-known technologies like rules and volumetric and frequency, usually UEBA, and some model for some specific problems. But this work quite well on the infrastructure because there is a lot of commonality on these layers. However, on the application layer, there is no commonality. Each business application is different. And usually what we have in the business layer application detection, we have rules. And we all know that detection by rules doesn't work because a lot of false positive, false negative, high cost. So we need a new approach. So this new approach, which means more accurate and generic, to do that, we have looked on what happened on the detection space. And what we have seen was the transition from rules to frequency and volumetric analysis, which didn't deliver the accuracy required. And as a result, on the infrastructure layers, there is a trend to move from volumetric and frequency into looking on sequences. Just for example, think about NetFlow introduced by Cisco, and this also starting to happen also on the endpoint and the access layer. And what we have said was, okay, let's take this approach, which have proven to improve detection accuracy also to the application layer. And this is what Tracker Detect is all about, performing detection based on the context, based on the session that the user performed. However, there are a few challenges, and the two most significant ones are that each application is different. And as we said before, there is no commonality. But that's only one problem. The second one is, of course, that each of us doesn't have just one way of working with a business application. He has many ways. And if we want to really accurately detect anomalies, we have to learn first all his or her behavior profile. And so to tackle with the first problem, we have developed a generic activity flow model that can be applied to any application. So when we look on a sequence of activities performed by a user, we extract the operations performed by the user, the order in which this operation has been performed, and the time difference between these operations. What we are not taking into account is the meaning, because the meaning is definitely different. However, these three features, what have been done, in what order, in what time difference, is generic and can be applied to any application. But okay, so we know how to take a sequence of activities and translate it to some generic features. But now we have many sequences like that. How we will find out what is the anomaly sequence? And this is a real challenge. And to do that, we have first to learn all the profiles, the normal profiles. But how we will do that? So usually you take the session and group them and generate what we call clusters. But the current clustering technologies work well for marketing, but they are very inaccurate for detecting anomalies, which need to be very accurate. So we have developed a unique session clustering engine that can work on any number of sessions, is very accurate. You don't have to clean up the outliers, it finds them automatically, and you don't need to know how many profiles to generate, which of course you don't know. Now, once we have such a clustering engine, we now can take the session, make the profiles by grouping the similar sessions, and learn automatically for each user the profiles that characterize his behavior in the business application. And now when there is a new session that doesn't comply with any of the known profiles, then this is something that should be looked at, because this is a true anomaly. And we can do that by comparing the user behavior to its own profiles, or we can do it by comparing the user to his peer groups. So you can do the analysis from all these angles to make the detection even more accurate. So to summarize, what Tracker IQ brings to the table is first to detect the unknown. No need to write rules which detect only the known, but be able to detect any abnormal without defining any rules. But that is not enough if it won't be accurate. And what we are bringing to the table, and that's what our customers are telling us, is a very accurate detection. And just one of our major clients, Poste Italiane, a financial institution in Italy, the second largest financial institution with more than 100,000 employees, and monitoring their Office 365, we are generating around 1 or 2 alerts per day, something between 10 to 12 a week. And what is also unique, and that's what our customers like, is the ability to use it for any type of application. And most of our clients start with 1 or 2 and then expand it to all their business applications once they see the value. And the nice thing about it, that it's the same engine that can work on logs of any application. The only thing you need is the logs of the business application, and then you can apply that and get the anomalies very accurate. And also, once you find an anomaly, you want to investigate it. And what we are bringing to the table is also a set of incident investigation tools. So when there is such an alert, then the security analyst, using our graphic user interface, can, in a matter of 1 to 5 minutes at most, fully understand what happened, because we translate the logs from their cryptic way to something which is in normal or in a normal readable language. So the analyst, even if he's not an expert in these logs, can easily understand what happened. So then he can ping the user and ask him, okay, why you have done that? Please explain that to me. So then he finds if it's a true abuse or misuse, or maybe impersonation. So with this tool, there is a new way to analyze, monitor any business application log, find anomalies, investigate them quickly, and get the visibility required into your business application. And that has a lot of implications, because using this tool, for example, we talk a lot about supply chain attacks, but to really detect and prevent supply chain attack, you have to look on what your entities, employees are doing in your business application. And that's how many of the supply chain attacks happen. Without such visibility, it will happen. And we provide these tools that can provide you not only against data breach, but against any cyber attack. Thank you very much.
So you should be able to see most of my screen now. Well, DRAND is a company that was founded in 2014 by some guys, how do we say it, who was professionally active on the internet. And what they realized was that they had never been discovered and they have never been stopped. So they sat down to define how do you stop the really advanced guys like themselves. And what came out of this was DRAND, which is specialized in anomaly detection on networks. So our whole approach is to find the advanced hackers. So we have named our solution Angle, because you simply need to approach data from several angles in order to find the advanced hackers. And what we've come to is a solution that today has proven itself in a way that when we interact with a new company, even though they have intruders in their network in advance, we can build a normal picture and find them. 3 out of 4 cases, we do find hidden hackers in networks, even though they're good security. And we currently we define our solution as NDR, because that's the category we fit most into right now, but what we do is still the same. The reason the company was established was seen end-to-end encryption, and I fully agree that it's a problem with all the signature-based approaches, because it prevents, when you're very much based on signature, encryption makes life much more difficult for you. And another major challenge is that we made an investigation and figured out that, to our estimates, only 10% of the APT groups in the world are actually known by industry. That means that if you go for the signature-based approach, then you will only be looking for 10% of the actors and leaving out 90% of the really good guys, or the really advanced guys. Another issue is, of course, that we simply don't have enough people to protect ourselves. There are so many guys on the bad side, but we lack good people on the defensive side. And so we needed to build a solution that could help those who were there and bring down the amount of experts needed. And then, of course, we had to do this security without breaking the bank. And I'm sorry for simplifying the world, but the way we looked at it when we discussed detection in the early days was that you could wait it out. And we actually met customers that said, well, we don't want to do anything right now. We'll just wait until we are hacked, and then we'll contact you. Then you could do endpoint protection, which has a lot of advantages. You can do log analysis and feed them into your SIEM system. You can do network monitoring on the outside of the firewall, which is good for public search, which need a large number of attacks to prove that they are important, because they can then see all the scannings and the attacks towards the network. And then we have where we've placed ourselves as network detection right inside the network, or right inside the firewall. And that way we will get what we need in terms of data. Our approach to detection is to turn it a bit upside down. So instead of looking for the known bad stuff or trying to predict what hackers do, and that also includes artificial intelligence and machine learning. Then we turn it around and say, we'll look at all the good, we'll understand the good and remove it, and then we'll look at the rest. And as long as we haven't proven it good, we consider it bad. And it requires a lot of data modeling and building, and it requires also the interaction of humans. And that's one of our key principles. Our way of looking at the world is that all automated systems can be circumvented by good hackers. So if you need to find the good hackers, you also need humans to fight them and look for them. So we've, as I said, we believe that you need to look at data from several angles in order to find the anomalies that pin out the advanced hackers, and that we do with our approach to anomaly detection, which is look at what is good and put it in a big pile, and then focus on what we haven't approved yet. Of course, we have a machine learning engine that also gives us another angle, but it's not what we rely on to find the hackers themselves. It just gives an additional angle, the same way that signatures and filters and all these algorithms give us an additional angle to understand the data and to find what is good. And of course, all the customized rules you can set up. And all this merged together on the data gives us this very strong picture of how data looks. And on a typical customer, if we take a standard office environment or a standard production with 500 employees, we detect real intruders every 6 months. And we detect them really early. And the way we've implemented it into our tool is that we need some human interaction. So we have an analysis tool that either the customers can use them themselves, or they can hire somebody like us or their existing suppliers to actually work with the system. We have we've set up a system in Denmark, or a setup where we are going to protect, or we are protecting the critical infrastructure, and where this critical infrastructure is working together across a whole sector, and you have a central unit surveilling it and supporting the individual critical infrastructure points. The users are all the way on all levels. That means the central sector cert, or the users themselves, or us. We can get these automated or customized reports to get a continuous understanding of the network, meaning that we also educate the users in what they have to look for and what they have to be aware of. And of course, they can log in and get access to their own data. And what we've seen, if we compare it, for instance, to a SIEM system, is that it's extremely cost efficient to do network detection. It takes around an hour, maybe an hour and a half, to set up the sensor, and that after that you're up and running and can start your anomaly detection. In terms of operational cost, if you compare it to a SOC based on a SIEM, we can cut most of the cost down and still get a huge value and a deep insight into what's going on. And we had a lot of added benefits. One of the things that our clients like a lot is that it's not a black box we supply. They have full access to all of their own data. They know exactly what's going on in the box, and they know what data goes in and out, and they can analyze it themselves. And it's fully non-intrusive and doesn't add any additional security risks to the network. And when we say collaborative support, it's because the whole setup we've made in Denmark on a national level is that players, both private and public, can work together in using this system to help each other and facilitate an increased security level for the whole industry. So our customer base, it's very much, you can see we started in 2014. So most of our, the biggest part of our customer base is the sectors that needed it the most. and had to get on a high level of maturity very fast. Now we're getting more and more standard companies and standard organizations into our portfolio as well. But we do have the sectors that were out on forerunners on security, especially the public utility and critical infrastructure we're rolling out for all of Denmark in certain sectors. And of course, we are also into the defense sector, and recently we've seen a big rise in the production sector because there are very few good detection solutions and protection in general to the production. So that's basically our approach. I would love to have more discussions about technology and all this stuff and how we do it at a later stage.
Thank you very much, Michael.
So thank you for having me, and I will be giving you some very high-level indications of what LogPoint does. We do a lot of things, but this is focused on automation, and look forward to this discussion. I think it's really cool to have these different technology approaches, and I guess that we all are adding to the total cyber defense. So just very briefly on the company, LogPoint is founded here in Denmark. Today we have more than 1,200 customers, and we are in 10 global offices in the US and mostly in Europe, 300 employees, and are growing about 50% on an annual basis, and are actually the only non-US SIM solution. We have a couple of other, we have some verticals. Critical infrastructure is very high on our list among some of our customers. And then we are very focused on application and specifically SAP security, where we acquired a German company a couple of years ago. And our latest addition to the portfolio was the acquisition of an Israeli company, SecBI. They were doing Universal XDR and SOAR. And this is actually kind of the topic I want to dive a little bit deeper into today. We are partner-based, so we have more than 60 certified partners across the globe. And it's very well-known global partners like Capgemini and CGI. And then we have a lot of local partners, of course, as well. And mostly serve higher end of the SMB market and larger enterprises. So LogPoint's total product encompasses today classical SIM, which of course is transitioning now, and a SIM without UEBA is probably not a SIM anymore, and I would even argue that a SIM without SOAR these days is probably not a SIM. So hopefully somebody will recategorize this to the frustration of the poor customer with another acronym. And then finally, UEBA or LogPoint for SAP. I agree with David that application security is probably an area that's been overlooked for a long time. And since this is where most of the financial information and IP resides, manufacturing data, it's probably where many of the hackers will move in the future. So follow the money. And one option, of course, could be, and I know it's on the agenda today, is XDR. And I guess there's kind of two areas of approaching this. You can either come from the endpoint part of the XDR equation, or you can come from the SIM UEBA part of the SOAR equation, and then let's see who wins. It's a battle out there in the marketing departments, but at the end of the day, it's giving the customers, whichever way you see it, a much better way of getting observability, and what we are thriving for as well is to kind of provide a platform for the data-driven CISO. And what I want to touch on today is the SOAR element of XDR, because this was all about the challenge we all have in terms of how do we address the fact that we cannot keep up with machines and the enormous amount of people missing in with our poor customers from a cybersecurity knowledge perspective. So I think that all of what we're all trying to do is to automate as much as possible and to filter out the noise and make whatever events that are happening in infrastructures as clean as possible. So the core for everybody, just to make sure, the SOAR piece of which is security, orchestration, automation, and response, is the actual acronym, and it's all about basically automating and getting a clearer picture of what events have been generated in your infrastructure, mostly through your SIEM solution. But it will also tap into threat intelligence feed, where you can subscribe to whatever feeds that are relevant for your business, whether you're in critical infrastructure or more generically. It is a generic way of adding valuable information to the events that are being generated. Then it's also about sorting out what is important and what is just urgent or noisy. And I like the approach before that Michael was saying, that get rid of all the good stuff and focus on the bad stuff. So fully subscribe to this, and I think that then the ticketing and case management part of this is something that's less important to us. Some are better than this, so that would just be that. If you look at it very easily, you could have the level 3 analysts from 1 to 3, and if we can automate the level 1 security analyst and provide much more rich events to the level 2 and 3, we are very long along the way. Another thing is actually that from a more geographical perspective, I think that, yeah, obviously we're now addressing also the Israeli market, which of course you have a known broad capability in the cyber domain, and the same with the US. But in Europe, we are struggling a bit, to say the least, and are behind the curve. So being a European company is really interesting that we can now start to collaborate, and we are super happy that we acquired SecBI and now have LogPoint Israel established. So right now we are 11 people based in Tel Aviv, and the whole SOAR element of LogPoint will really increase, and we will actually be adding MDR services to our partners as well, not directly to end customers, but we will be a force multiplier to our partners, so that when they run into issues, we will have level 3 and 4 analysts available that can work with them either in building playbooks or in terms of if they run into capability problems when they have incidents. So for everything, and maybe and sorry for if I'm preaching to the choir, but what is it actually that a SOAR solution can do? And we all know phishing, so I just thought I wanted to spend 2 seconds on giving an example of what this really means. So once you have an incident, somebody clicks a link, you might get some alert fired from your SIEM, and then somebody's got to do something. And here analysts are struggling because there's a whole series of tedious digital activities that needs to be created and done, and that can be everything from gathering information, doing the triage, finding what you have to do, you have to investigate, and then you have to do some kind of response. So this whole process is basically automated because it is digital behaviors, and we can do this in a combination of human interaction, but also very much machine learning aided, and this is where the SOAR element becomes quite relevant. And what that in essence mean, as an example, is that if you take a basic phishing attack, it could take 3+ hours if you are really good, and it could also take 3 days if you are a medium, and then we don't talk about the rest who are really left in the dark. And you spend a lot of time investigating. And with a fully automated SOAR, you can instigate this and actually get a full picture within a few minutes. And this is just one example of a lot that can be automated. And I think it's one of those things that we need to address in order to get someone somewhat ahead of the curve, if that's at all possible, in terms of mitigating risk and giving our customers a fair chance to keep up with the hackers. So this is in summary what a SOAR element does, and we strongly believe that the whole area of combining the technologies we're seeing right now. There's a lot of point solutions. We have the NDR we just heard about. We have EDRs. we have the SIM, we have UEBA, we have SOAR. There's a lot of things, and obviously it will converge into the cloud. And I think that this is the trend that's happening, and we are for sure going to address this. So it is the overload that's the issue. It's a lot of the human issues that are also here. We can do a lot technologically, but the biggest challenge is actually to make sure that it has a business fit, and it taps into the each organization's situation, and that the company know what is critical and what do they want to protect and how do they want to protect it and how do they want to react when they are breached. These are still enormous mountains that needs to be climbed by most companies, and adding a SIM pretty much is to us compared to having a financial system, and you need an ERP system, or if you're a sales department, you need a CRM system to have a common platform where you can make the sense of all of these technologies. Some customers would need a very deep NDR solution, and we fully recognize that, and other things can happen in EDR as well. That where you need a full solution. But it's rarely when you see right now that XDRs can exist without a SIM. A SIM can exist without an XDR because we integrate with endpoint detection. So I think it's going to be quite some time, and that's probably multiple quarters from now that an XDR player coming from the endpoint, they cannot exist without having extreme data either from the network or also from the SIMs. And then finally, let's not forget about, even though that it's boring to a lot of people, but also when you talk about supply chain, the word compliance and risk is still very much important. And we believe that customers need a SIM platform to also orchestrate how they are then compliant, not in terms of just documenting, but actually technically to verify that what you have agreed either internally through processes and what the ISO standards or other critical frameworks you need to comply to, you need to have a platform that can document this and also verify technically that things are happening as they're supposed to happen. So this is why I think we still need very much a SIM platform for most companies. And then I actually just took this just to make sure that if somebody, and you can get the slides afterwards, what's that difference between the SIM, and an XDR platform and so on. And so this is just a simple overview, and we still believe that in order to manage most of your incidents and alerts, you either need an XDR or a SIM, and then as you go down the line, everything becomes a little more tricky. But merging SIM and SOAR, you will have covered most. And obviously, if you want to do root cause analysis, if you really have heavy EDR requirements, then of course you need to have an EDR solution. But I guess the key word is to make sure that everything is joined together. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is of course embedded in everything we do. And I think it's those kinds of minimal standards that will make the customers at least a little more safe. We still have a long way to go, and we are a lot of people working on this, and I guess that's really important for how we see the future. So that was my fly into Logpoint and SOAR and automation.
Thank you, Sophie. Are you able to see my screen correctly?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's so great to be here and so exciting to hear all these different news coming from Denmark about also the acquisition of SecBI. I have to say, I personally know SecBI's founders from the beginning. We used to work together in previous companies, so I'm so excited to hear about this. So as you know, I'm filling in for someone else, and I will give you a presentation to kind of lead into our panel. So we're going to look at, what are CISOs facing as we're securing what's called around the bend. We're always looking around the bend. During the pandemic year, it's been a very tough time to kind of balance everything that was happening, and security management and security teams really stretched thin to, first of all, scale everything they were doing to get people working remotely, and then also catch up with security, which was kind of almost at odds with one another. So I hope this session will be a moment of clarity in your day before we move into the panel. So in the past few years, like we said, typical enterprise has really been turned inside out. Teams have seen rapid fundamental organizational changes, and that has been also kind of coming into this year as well. That's the ups and downs of different variants of the pandemic. People are coming back to the office, they're not in the office. It seems to be an ongoing mayhem in that sense, and also the security controls and the assets that we have to use inside the company and in clouds and everywhere else are always shifting around. So CISO's lives kind of look like this, where, you know, everything is burning, but they think it's okay. This is their daily life. It's a normal day. But then between seeing the workforce go remote faster than they can ever hope for that to happen, and then every sort of device connecting from every location, and the way we work changing, and they have all kinds of different obligations to make sure that employees are connecting safely and kind of retrain on certain things, then they're starting to see a lot more happening with nation state adversaries, cyber criminals making headlines almost every day with different attacks that have been growing in rate and size over the past few years. They're seizing vulnerabilities. Every oversight that they can get becomes an attack. And time again in security circles, we know that we can only cover so many bases daily. An attacker only has to find that one place where there was, you know, oversight, or, you know, some sort of even simple things like default password, or somewhere where it wasn't protected properly with maybe two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And so it seems like every other day we're seeing, you know, high-profile breaches, we're seeing ransomware cases that are dominating the news cycles, and this trend has been unrelenting. And it seems like the end of the year has come and it's not even getting any calmer. And it is within this sort of times in the world that CISOs are getting shaken out of their relative comfort zone. I mean, there's no comfort zone for security management, but they're finding out now also that their digitalization maturity is maybe not where it needed to be. Maybe it has to be somewhere else. Maybe they're catching up with a lot to do, but also having to now do it a lot faster than they would initially think they should. And so we're seeing here that 79% of CISOs said that the disruption of the coronavirus has really underscored the immaturity of their digitalization efforts. And almost everybody, 96%, said that the pandemic was going to speed up their digital reinvention by an average of 5.3 years. And that's probably even increasing now as we're moving into like a third year of the pandemic almost coming next year. So these changes that are required from CISO that they have to speed up, they're not managing security in a vacuum. They can, you know, stand to be blamed for data breaches or ransomware attacks, but none of this stuff happens in just one part of the organizations. CISOs actually balance a lot of the business risk across the entire organization and still have to work on their tactical, their strategic, and long-term plans. So some of the balancing act includes getting cybersecurity on the board's agenda and speaking the language of business risk with them. They also have to understand and invest in cloud and cloud security to keep the workforce operational, keeping the lights on, and, you know, keeping serving customers no matter what happens. They have to continue implementing security basics, you know, that actually make or break the program, the stuff that's not exciting, the asset inventory, the patch management, the things that are not, you know, those very I don't know, jarring things that we see in the news typically. They have to work on now with supply chain issues. They work with regulation, with a lot of security regulations coming up. The more geographies they work with, the more regulation they have. And I work at IBM, and I know that we pretty much adhere to every possible security regulation across the globe. They're seeing workflows rapidly evolving, and security has to be part of it in every stage. So a lot of projects there, creating and reinforcing a cyber secure culture, which is ever so essential. More than ever now, when people are working so decentralized, they're not all in the office. Not everybody is being protected by certain controls that we have on site. And the security culture matters more than ever before. They're also tasked with modernizing the infrastructure. they're supposed to be seen as innovators. Yes, go after those special startups that are now bringing new solutions and new ways of thinking. So kind of be open to that and making sure that, attackers are getting bigger and better. We have to also renovate and innovate with our tools and leverage them. So we could see that everything we're doing, everything a CISO does, is meant to control business risk, and there's a lot of work to do. Now we're going to look at just a couple of stats here of what is actually hitting organizations. This is from IBM's X-Force team, but I think every vendor has these kinds of details and data that they collect. We look annually at attacks that we actually analyzed and responded to. So we have incident response teams, and we look at the threats. And from the most recent report, which was for 2020, because we're finalizing now the new one, we're seeing that ransomware is obviously the main headache for a lot of security teams for companies at large. And then there's data theft, unauthorized server access are also up there. Surprisingly, in last year, the business email compromise attacks dropped considerably. And we saw that in our data, but we also saw it in law enforcement data that we looked at. So it might just be that finally, after many, many years of drilling that multi-factor authentication is a necessity, maybe it has been impacting, how many attacks are actually successful. The entry points into companies have been proving to be very pointed. There's scanning and exploiting vulnerable systems, and then there's phishing. So kind of interesting. Usually phishing was the number one way into an organization, and a lot of it is still email. This is the one way that criminals can communicate with unsuspecting users. And so we're seeing that scanning and exploiting is also becoming a very pointed threat. And on top of two tactics, multi-factor authentication can actually lend a hand on the phishing. The remote desktop windows can also be hardened with two-factor authentication. It can prevent those brute force attacks. There's a lot of places here that we actually can act. It's not some really enigmatic attack. It's not something we don't already know. So we see those kinds of statistics, and it helps us understand where we should place our investments, where we should emphasize in the education for employees. Now, I think it's a given in today's uncertain environment, businesses do need to differentiate themselves. They have to create more innovative and more responsive user experiences that are more adaptive, that are continuously available to all the users. And that's from their data center all the way to the edge of wherever their users are, moving data or working on stuff. And leaders have to modernize their business and IT, which spans multiple cloud environments nowadays. If most organizations want to work with one cloud. They're saying, I want to be an expert on this one cloud and really focus everything there. But if they just have one development team already putting a product on another cloud for whatever reason, then they're already in a multi-cloud environment. They have to sometimes rely on open source. They have to provide access to data no matter where it resides. And this landscape provides greater operational agility and accommodates all kinds of new data sources and applications and workflows. But it also provides more of an attack surface for attackers. So again, we're saying, things are changing rapidly. We have to be more agile. We have to be more innovative, but we also have to watch out for what attackers are doing and how they're going to be able to kind of broaden the attack surface that they have into the organization. I'd say here that in terms of what can help us do that better, and others have spoken about it before, is automation. Automation really gives people the gift of time. It improves experiences, it improves their productivity and their operational efficiency. We don't have a ton of staff. In security companies, we have a lot of staff. So, in a big security company, you can have thousands of people who are doing security or dedicated to it. But in other organizations, we don't have it. So when we're able to take solutions that incorporate automation into everything we're doing, especially now that we're stretched so thin, that can really be helpful and also reduce, in case of a data breach, it really can help reduce the time it takes us to detect and to contain an attack and save tons of money there as well. So with the increase also in very public security breaches and increasing regulations, boards are paying more attention to the CISO and to cybersecurity. Now everybody is recognizing that security is a digital backbone of the enterprise that can, that's the only way we're doing business nowadays, and it can carry huge risks to its ability to operate. And they're starting to form more dedicated committees to start and discuss cybersecurity. They're bringing in board members with security experience, maybe a former CISO is coming into the picture, or maybe they're hiring a third-party consultant that can advise on business risk. So these are the imperatives that boards are looking at. They want to talk about security, resilience, and planning. They want to see more communication about cybersecurity throughout the company. They want the culture to follow the policies that they have in place, the standards that they're communicating, and they want to see from the CISO strategy, renovation, and innovation. So what CISOs want to have in order to be able to provide this is better data. Of course, they want to be a data-driven CISO. This is a very pivotal way for CISOs to look at things. They want more visibility. They want risk quantification. And so working a lot more on that risk equations that's so familiar to us by now. Automating, optimizing resources across the board is critical to being able to stand a chance against the amount of threats that every organization and the amount of incidents, small and big, that every organization is facing nowadays. And also to continuously shift the culture. We always talk about it from every angle possible. So what are the biggest factors motivating CISOs to implement, let's say, new technologies? Every CISO looks at most of these factors. They want to save some costs. They want to improve their security to actually have improvements. Maybe they have regulatory requirements that are pushing them to do it for increased agility sometimes. Maybe a new revenue stream that kind of goes together with regulatory requirements. Maybe they want to open in a different country. And also attracting new customers, showing them that they are secure and that they're able to guard their data better or serve them in a better way. So I think this is kind of iterating the points that CISOs are really concerned about, the ways that they're going to look at technology, what drives them to look for new ways to address risk. All these factors are parts of what CISOs are dealing with nowadays. So I think that these are indeed many good reasons to adopt new technology, but I think also above all is a distilled understanding that if the threat landscape continues to change, continues to evolve, but we do not, then one of us becomes obsolete. We can't keep the same approach to security or the same attitudes towards our users and customers, or even our partners and third parties nowadays, using the same language, using the same ideas, the same technologies, or doing everything that we do the same and expect to have a different result. To that effect, keeping the organization safe and managing risk has to go on to keep the job description of the CISO, but the CISO also has to become a lot more strategic in his thinking or her thinking and an agent of change across the organization. So you always see better what's around the bend when you're leading into the bend. And looking into 2022, we do have still opportunities to change how we plan and how we want to respond to what may come next. And I'm moving into the panel discussion now with our panelists. So please get ready. I know that the situation, we talk about the pandemic a lot because it truly does affect everything that we're doing. And I recently heard about a new variant of the COVID-19 virus, the Omicron variant. And the pandemic continues to impact us, bringing people in and out of offices. People can fly to other customers. They cannot fly to customers. Things continuously change. And this is why we also have to continuously adapt ourselves in terms of the security program and everything that we're doing at work to make sure our customers and our organizations are safe. So we're going to kick off the panel. I'm just going to make sure that all the panelists are online. Sure. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have with us Jesper Zerlang, CEO at LogPoint, Reut Menashe, CEO at TetResponse, Michael Lentje Anderson, he's partner at Durant, and David Movshevitz, CTO and co-founder of Tracker Detect. Welcome, and thank you so much for being on the panel today.
Hi.
Thanks.
Hello. So on the panel's agenda today, we're going to begin by exploring an urgent subject that's on every CISO's mind, and we talked about supply chain attacks. These attacks have become very high impact incidents. They feature extensive collateral damage, including reputational damage for companies, and these are harder to detect because they abuse the most inherent trust relationships that underpin businesses and business operations. So to our panel, how do you see the risk mitigation paradigm for supply chain attacks? Who would like to begin? Jesper, would you like to begin?
Sure, I can start on this one. I think that in order to just see, I mean, from a supply chain instance where we see the most is actually in corporations where the OT environment is becoming more and more important. And so supply chain in terms of attacking weak spots in an OT environment that inherently has not been through the same security observation as the traditional part of the IT infrastructure. We think it's super important that OT is thought into the security equation. And one thing that I'm still a little bit puzzled about is that it's normally two different organizations. So you have an OT organization that takes care of this, and you have an IT organization that takes care of the IT. And then, yeah, often the CISO is not even involved in the OT. I know there are some places, but sometimes they are just keep out of our system. We manage it ourselves, and that's just super dangerous in terms of how to do this. So in terms of mitigation, I think that not being biased, but I obviously think you should also implement your SIM in the OT environment. But it's one of the areas where you can actually have a huge mitigation is to make sure that the OT and the rest of the infrastructure, since it's part of the overall IT posture, security posture, it's one of those areas where you really need to make sure that all data is being taken care of, and then it could actually move into the ERP, but then my response is probably going to get too long. So I think that one of the key areas is to find one of the very weak spots, which is the connection between OT and admin IT, and I think this is an area where companies can improve a lot.
Indeed, thank you. Michael, do you have a few thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that what we've seen the most and what maybe the most worrisome from our perspective is this. In Denmark, we have a lot of sub-suppliers for larger companies, and these sub-suppliers may be very small-scaled. And of course, they don't have the same security as an SMB, as their big customers have. So you have, I wouldn't say the same, but it's the same problem as Jesper described. You have an OT, which is unprotected or more or less, and you have IT, which is well protected. Here you have a customer, which is well protected, a large company, and then you have a lot of suppliers, which are largely unprotected and really weak link. So I think the whole thing about protecting SMBs and bringing them up is the key area we need to look into to protect ourselves and also protect the business of all these companies. So because in Denmark, we're very reliant on the very small companies to feed the larger companies.
I understand. This is a good point. Reut, do you have some thoughts about supply chain attacks?
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, supply chain attacks. We have it's been in the news for the following months, much more because of the SolarWinds attack, I guess. And I can say that I see new solutions around trying to find more important and more tools for detections of the supply chains attacks. But I think in the end, we all know that it's not all about the technology. It's also, technology is very important, but it's also the process of our information security process and the business projects are very much important to mitigate the risk. So I would recommend first understand what are the business process that involve the supply chains. And second, I will assume that you're going to be breached. This is the most of the important assumptions that you can take in order to mitigate and to reduce the risk, because we all know the attacks are coming. They will occur someday, and we want to be ready. So be ready and try to reduce the breach when it will happen. You can do it by a lot of controls. You can encrypt the data. You can monitor the vendors that are giving you services. You need to monitor the privileged accounts that have access to your information. There are basically lots of processes that you can start and initiate, and I think this will be very successful in mitigating the risk of supply chain attacks.
Thank you very much. David, do you have comments to add about
Yeah.
supply chain attack protection?
I would like to add just one comment to what Ruth was saying, and I think she is very correct that we should assume that the attackers would find a way to penetrate, if not your IT infrastructure or OT, but your suppliers. Now, and that's mean you need to constantly monitor. I mean, you have to take all the controls, but I think detection or monitoring what was going on your environment, as well as on your suppliers, and maybe in the same way that today we have seen that many enterprises require from their suppliers to implement single sign-on, to implement two-factor, and to implement other, they should require also from their suppliers to be monitored, because even we all know, as Ruth was saying, that you would implement these security mechanisms, still the motivated attacker would find a way to penetrate. So as we require from suppliers to implement prevention, they should also implement detection at all layers, and maybe even provide to you some report that would prove to the enterprise that the supplier is properly monitored, and if there will be something abnormal, he will know about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So moving to the next question. We know about point solutions that are becoming increasingly debated, and managed security leaders are now considering SIEM versus EDR, XDR, or even MDR. You know, some of them are saying my SIEM is sufficient. Others are saying I need to also add these other solutions or other architectures. What is your viewpoint on these types of solutions, and which would you prioritize? We're going to start with David. Since, yeah.
Okay, so I think that the world will go through to MDR from the following reason. The amount of knowledge that is required to properly monitor what is going on is increasing. And most enterprises, except maybe the very, very large enterprises, don't have the resources to really properly monitor and investigate. And this is where the MDRs are providing the values. Now, when you are looking for an MDR, then one thing that is very important is that not only they would monitor your infrastructure, but they would monitor all your business application. Because as we were saying before, we have to follow the money, and the money is in the business applications. So enterprises should look for MDRs that provide them not only infrastructure detection, which is important, but also application detection as well, the business application detection.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Michael.
Yeah, I think David touched upon it. I don't think there's one answer for all customers. It depends on what size you are, as David says, but also your maturity and your threat picture. We're very careful to recommend something generically to companies without first going into their threat picture and their risk appetite in total, and of course, as David says, how many resources they have to throw after this. So I don't think I would put my eggs in one of these baskets, but I think I would recommend to most organizations to have a good understanding of their needs and their business and their risk appetite, and then decide what to go for from there. Because I think right now, all of these solutions are relevant depending on what kind of company you are.
I agree. Reut, you see a lot of companies. What do you think about these types of solutions? Would you prioritize one of them?
Yeah, I tell you, at the end, it's all about the visibility. You can talk about SIEM, you can call it EDR, XDR. For me as responder, when I meet company which is in a crisis and all of the bad things happens to her, doesn't matter. What matter is if I can use the information that's being gathered in order to help them to get to come back to their business as soon as possible. So for me, it's all names of vendors using different or more of the same technologies to collect logs and to create detection rules based on the logs. So at the bottom line, you as a CISO or any other person who is responsible for this process, you need to make sure that you have the relevant and valuable logs and I would say information even that's going to help you when you will need to respond to a breach, to an incident. So I think we're going to see evolving products in the following months. Basically, SIEM, XDR, MDR, they are collecting logs from different devices, different technologies around the enterprise or the SMB network and environment. I will just say, make sure that you have the relevant information and that your analyst has a proper way to investigate. That's the most important thing to have.
I agree. It does help us detect and respond. Thank you. Jesper, would you like to add anything to this question?
No, I'm fine as long as everybody chooses SIM first. No. I fully agree with what everybody is saying, and I think that I'm actually alluding to that if I was a CISO, I would also look carefully into MDR and MSSPs, and because you need to have some assistance just in terms of the sheer volume, the complexity, and so on. And MDRs are using XDR, EDR, and SIM anyway, so to some extent. But I really agree with Reut in terms of visibility and creating a data platform for the CISOs. I mean, a lot of CISOs there are kind of two CISOs. There are the compliance-driven CISOs and data-driven CISOs. And my biggest concern when talking about these technologies is also this, that you need to have logs, not only from your critical situations. I mean, I just was presented to a very large European organization that are doing an RFP on SIM and XDR for the entire organization. They want to go entirely digital, and the solution needs to cover everything. And I asked them about the SAP system, and it was almost like, oops, we forgot. And I really agree with David on the application side of things. It's grossly overlooked. There's so much focus on network detection and SIM events and so on, but people tend to forget applications. You can talk about of course, SAP and Oracle and these more standard applications, but what about all the custom developed applications over the last 20 years? They are a huge problem. So all in all, I think all these acronyms are converging, and within 1 or 2 years, it would be, except for MDR, SIM, EDR, XDR, you would not be able to tell the difference. It's just a matter of what companies have the best value proposition and understands the markets best that's going to win.
Indeed, I agree. I do also see and hear that from other security managers about kind of an integration of SIEM with these other services. All right, so let's go to the third question. We're going to talk a little bit about zero trust. So there are already standardized programs and frameworks that kind of make organizations lean towards a zero trust approach, and they're getting them on that journey. how do you see this security paradigm, and what are the underlying controls that we are obviously already using that are very essential to a zero trust model? So Jesper, we can start with you.
Well, actually, this is one of the areas where I probably have the least experience. But what my point to this is that the zero trust is a nice aspiration, and at the end of the day, I would just ask to say, okay, how do you once you implement your zero trust strategies, how do you actually know if they're working as intended? How do you know what kind of tools you need to put in place to make sure that it's not getting compromised? So at the end of the day, whatever zero trust strategy you try to implement, you still need to have a governing system, digital preferably, that can make sure that you're not living in a perceived safe environment.
Indeed. Reut, we'll go back to you.
Yeah. So part of helping organization when they're tackling an incident, a cyber incident, a lot of the time we are helping the organization to recover and to increase their security maturity after the incident. A lot of the organization, we help them to understand what's going to be their strategic security model. And I can say that for the most organization, especially post or middle Corona time, zero trust model is something that is very relevant for our time. Because in my opinion, it doesn't matter where the employee is based. It can be in the office, she can be in her home, she can fly fly and to be in airports, she can be on movement. What's most important is how you secure your data. So I think the zero trust model is very in the benefit of the new paradigm of the workspace. And I think that there are many controls out there. I don't think there are like very one specific model that you can adopt, but I would go and adjust the paradigm of securing the organization based on the zero trust model. And there are many products, and not everything is relevant for any company. It really depends of the industry that you're working in, and it really depends how the company is operating day to day. So there are many factors to take into consideration, but there is no other model like the last years models of using an office network is something that should go out. And yeah, this is the future. Doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter which internet you use. It just matters how you protect your data.
I agree with that. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Not much. We haven't met it a lot, but there's, as Ruth says, there's some thoughts in it I really like, especially because as soon as you start automatically trust your devices or certain network traffic, then you also can create a false sense of security and a sleeping or a pillow for you to relax on. So I think the idea of not trusting anything is good because it keeps you sharp, and I think that's the most important part right now from our clients.
All right, thank you. David, do you want to add to this question about zero trust?
Just one comment I think I would like to add to what Jasper was saying about monitoring, because yes, zero trust means you don't trust, you everything has to be re-authenticated and ensuring the security of the device that is you are connected to. But what is happening after that is not handled by the zero trust model, and for that the least that you need to do is to monitor what is actually going on on your environment and on your business applications.
I agree. Thank you very much. So we'll go into the next question. It's about the regulatory landscape. We know that there are rising regulations across the globe and extortion attacks all over the place. And a lot of times they just take a ton of data and they even threaten companies with, if you don't pay this, your regulator is going to end up fining you. So customer data has become as important as crown jewels, as important as intellectual property. And what is especially important to safeguard today is also a moving target to many threat groups. What would you say is an important point in protecting customer data in this type of new landscape where every other day somebody can grab all the data and threaten you with it? David, go ahead.
I think that first of all, you have to encrypt everything. And then after data has been encrypted, you need to know how your keys are managed. But what is also very important is you have to monitor all the access to your data. And it's because extortion is one way, but there is other threats to your data from your internal employees, maybe someone impersonating as your employees, and for that, and they have legitimate access. So in addition to protecting the data against extortion attacks by encrypting, you have to protect your customer data, which is very valuable, via monitoring the access by your legitimate employees and customers to prevent any data breach, and or at least detect it as quick as possible, because you can't prevent it. They have legitimate access, but you need to monitor them. And just by monitoring, and the fact that your employees knows they are being monitored at the application level, then they would think twice or third times before they would try to do anything illegal that may cause you getting in trouble with your regulations and compliance requirements.
For sure. So insider threat is just as important. I agree. I'll go back to Michael on this one.
Yeah, what I think is actually one of the interesting parts of this question is the whole regulation part. Because we've seen that in terms of GDPR in Europe, it has really pushed the organizations to get hold of and build some basic security and processes around whole thing of protecting the personal data. So, and I know there's a lot of work going on in Europe, on European level, and also in Denmark, on whether to implement standards for certifying and having regulations about how your security should be as a company. And it's a two-edged sword, because once you put up regulations, you're also limiting yourself, and you're also trying to make a one-fits-all solution. So to me, actually, the funny part of the question is, what do we do in regulations, and are we about to shoot ourselves in the foot, or is it actually a help for the society to put in regulations and certifications and all this stuff?
I agree. I think that regulation has to come with a lot more action from the regulators, and not in the way of finding companies, but rather than helping companies. Jesper, would you like to add anything?
No, I think it's very good points, and I agree on your last point that we should not only be sticking everybody out there in the market. But I think one very important issue is, of course, the whole cloud craziness in terms of just send it in the cloud, then you are safe. Probably not. But it's also that we can use technology to make sure that this becomes a relevant compliance framework and not just a framework for the sake of the framework. I mean, we've all seen these frameworks where people are, applying 10 people full time for 6 months, and they come up with a document and a certification, and they are just as unsafe as before. So it's really going in as a company to again, what is really risky and what is not risky. I mean, we have an application we're very strong in healthcare, and we all agree that we have to balance this issue of if you don't want your neighbor to look in your personal medical records, but if you get to the hospital, you want all doctors to soon know everybody about your life right now. And it's a paradox that's super almost impossible to solve. And I think we just need, and might even be a generation, of course, a technology, but also a generation. I mean, all teenagers today, and even I would even lean out and say sub 35, they don't care so much about their data being, let's call it, compromised. I mean, I don't care if somebody looks at my birthday. What can that lead to? And maybe we are becoming a little too oversensitive, and I think that's also what Michael was saying, that we are risking to be put in a straitjacket that we don't want to be in, because in the name of being compliant and living up to all these regulations, we get paralyzed, and we need to come up with a better way, because right now it's not sustainable the way data is growing by exponentially, being able to keep up with the compliance framework. So it's probably back to Einstein again, of not repeating that compliance 20 years ago was good, but we need to think different, and somebody needs to come up with something else for the future digitized world to even survive.
I agree. Raut, you have a really good vantage point on compromised data. What do you think about essential ways to better protect data?
Yeah. So we all know that data is the new currency of our time. Data is something that everyone wants. I think, and as a defender perspective, and looking from the eye of the attacker, we need to leverage new controls, new technology, and to bring innovation to the table, especially exactly, I think this is what Jesper said. Unfortunately, we as defender are way back, and we need to evolve, and we need to change our mindset, because we see the attackers are evolving all the time. They're changing their method. They're having they don't have any regulation to work based on. Of course, we need to comply with regulation, but we need to think how we overcome the obstacles together as a global task force. We can see that attackers using blockchain. Why we as defender are not using blockchain to defend ourselves and to defend our data? Blockchain is something that can help us defend ourselves. Of course, blockchain has his own challenges, but in the perspective of securing the data, it's totally different than what we are regular to use today. Regular databases, classical web application, and everything. So that's my 5 cents about how we need to bring new innovation to protect our data.
Thank you, Raut. Your 5 cents is worth a lot of cents. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to go and give our audience a chance to speak and to ask our experts some questions. If you have a question, please raise it, and Sophie can take your question. It's been extremely insightful so far, so I hope that you do have some question for our team.
Thank you very much for all the speakers sharing with us your insight and knowledge about the difficulties of CISOs and corporates to struggling the digital area, and how to protect their application networks, users, data, and this is a very challenging, and how innovation coming from the vendors that speaking today can tackle the next generation of application detection, network detection and response. Thank you, Limor, for insightful presentation. Actually, this is really addressing Israelis and Danish companies that suffering from ransomware attack, and lately we heard about the giant energy company from Denmark, Vestas, that struggling with a ransomware attack, and same here in Israel. Public hospitals and such others. And thank you, Raut, for joining in short alert for this panel. And we wish you everybody happy Hanukkah, and to our colleagues and friends in Denmark, a Merry Christmas, a Merry and Happy Christmas. And please stay tuned for our next joint webinar in Q1 2020 for a joint webinar of Sensec and Cyber Together. Thank you, Sophie and Klaus.